Told y'all that this is one of the most anti-black racist administrations we've ever seen. Check this out here. The federal government no longer explicitly prohibits contractors from having segregated restaurants, waiting rooms, and drinking fountains. The segregation clause is one of several identified in a public memo issued by the General Services Administration last month, affecting all civil federal agencies. The memo explains that it is making changes prompted by Donald Trump's executive order on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which repealed an executive order signed by President Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1965 regarding federal contractors and non-discrimination. So there's been a lot of reporting around this, and so the whole goal is to say all these companies that you don't have to abide by these rules that say that you can't discriminate. What do you make of this, Larry? And I keep saying that probably the most violent racist we've ever had in the White House, and this says a lot, is Woodrow Wilson. This administration wants to defund Black America. It is targeting Black people. They are anti-Black. We can go on and on and on, and this, of course, is just another part of that.
Yeah, this is part of, the very beginning of a long 4 years. And Roland, I was on your show last week, and I said, we've been focusing on, we're using the phrase anti-DEI. We should be saying these people are pro-Jim Crow, because and this is a perfect example. This strong focus on anti-DEI. You're right. It's centered on anti-blackness. It is focused on dismantling all the progress that was made. And obviously we talked on your show a lot about the Great Society programs, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, Fair Housing Act, etc. It is, and this, when he signed this executive order in the very beginning of his presidency, it was very clear about what he was trying to do here. Obviously, when we talk about federal contracts, that's taxpayer money. So we're not moving forward. They're trying to dismantle, once again, all the programs that were created, that was for over decades, really over centuries, in terms of Black folks, in terms of being on equal footing, or trying to get as close to equal footing. They're dismantling all those programs and using taxpayer dollars to do that.
So let me preface all of this by first saying that if you listen to my podcast long enough, you know that I don't believe that race exists. Race does not exist. It's not a belief fact. Race doesn't exist. But we have created race as an existence based on our own perceptions and thoughts. So we do have to deal with race as long as we are living and breathing in this existence. There are gatekeepers. There are gatekeepers who use fear in order to manipulate the population. In this instance, not that I agree with Donald Trump. It is very rare that I would agree with any politician, but it is even rarer that I would agree with this one. But not that I agree with Donald Trump, nor do I see some insidious thing that is going on here. And Roland Martin has always presented himself to me, for the most part, to be one of the gatekeepers of Black America. I am not a fan of Roland Martin. He sometimes make good points and sometimes appear to be standing up for what's better for people of color in America. But oftentimes I find him to be a gatekeeper of maintaining the status quo of the negative impact of integration. And in this instance, although it may seem like a slam dunk for him to say that this is a racist policy, that this is something that is going to set Black people back, he is devoid of history and understanding and where we are today. Because he's a gatekeeper of fear, he cannot see that there is absolutely no way that the American Black population would allow for Jim Crow to happen. There is absolutely no way that the large, predominantly white Americans will allow for us to go back to the Jim Crow laws of the 1950s, 40s, and back. It's just not going to happen. And Black people are no longer in the same position that they were in when we came out of slavery in 1864. We have grown tremendously. But I want you to conceptualize something. And I know a lot of people are out there saying, yes, we're going to get our Tulsas back. We're going to get our Greenwoods back. We're going to get our Lawrence Street. I don't know Lawrence Street. That's a Marietta thing. We're going to get all these Black prominent neighborhoods back. Not necessarily. But there is a mind shift that is possible to happen with all of this. When the Civil War ended and Jim Crow laws were put into place, the overwhelming majority of Black people, about 99%, were illiterate and poor. It was a long process up until the 1920s before we start really seeing successful Black communities. And of course, we know that these communities were burned out, flooded out, bombed out. Now, do you think that some racist white Americans will be able to run up into the neighborhoods of Atlanta, the Black neighborhoods of Atlanta that are prosperous, and bomb them out, burn them out? No. They do not have the law on their side. For one thing, the 1964 Civil Rights Bill is still valid. It doesn't repeal that at all. So you still cannot decide not to hire someone based on race, based on gender, based on creed. Those things are still in place. It is still illegal to do that. If a person were to, general contractor were to say, oh, I'm gonna have Black bathrooms and white bathrooms, I'm gonna have Black water fountains and white water fountains, those people will be ferreted out. Those companies will lose. Both Black and white America will have a problem with them. And I can go ahead and tell you right now, white America, Black Americans are not going to be the one to protest this. We're just not. We stood in line. We walked across the bridges. We did the Boys Bus boycotts. We're just not going to do that. We're not protesting in large numbers with flags and signs. It's your turn. But you're not going to have a company that will be able to survive in any metropolitan or in any decent sized metropolitan town, maybe somewhere out in the hill sticks of West Virginia, the middle of nowhere, Texas, the middle of nowhere, Wyoming. You may be able to get away with that where you only have about 1%, or for instance, like in the town of Spokane, nothing against Spokane, haven't been there before, but they only got 10,000 Black people. You may be able to get away with it in places like that, but you're not going to be able to do that in Dallas and Houston, Atlanta, DC, Detroit, Chicago, New York, LA, San Diego. You're not doing it. You can't even get away with that here in San Antonio. So it's not going to happen. You're not going to see this. Because if a company in San Antonio created a segregated situation like that, they would go out of business. But the mind shift is what I'm looking forward to. One of the things that my papav taught me, and that my grandparents taught me, that my parents taught me, is that integration was one of the worst things that could have happened to Black Americans. Within our own community of Marietta, my family saw how all the wealth in Black America left Lawrence Street, Cole Street. And then they wanted to go and live out there where they thought the grass was greener. They thought it was St. Augustine grass to go out there and live in Horseshoe Bend and out in East Cobb and all that sort of thing. But all they found out, it was nothing but crabgrass. And so integration created a situation where we wanted to integrate into their society, but we lost our society. We lost our base. This is why if you go in Atlanta and you drive up Buford Highway, you see the Spanish base is there. The Korean base is there. The Vietnamese base is there. The Indian base is there. They have their base community because they didn't try to integrate. They maintained their culture. They maintained their sense of self-worth. They didn't look and say, oh, I want to go move over there and buckhead with them. That's not what they did. They saw the mistakes that our ancestors made, and they are saying we're not doing that. They created their own schools. They created their own business, their own economies. My hope is that this creates the mind shift in Black people to go back to creating our own communities. That when you can ferret out a company and see that this company is basically racist, why deal with them? We're not going to give them their money. And guess what? White Americans, for the most part, aren't going to give those companies their money either. You got a company that sets these things up. You think the person in charge of giving out government contracts is going to give the contract to that person, to that company? Hell no, they're not. You know they're not. But it's the psychological thing that Black people may actually stop saying, I'm going to become someone in STEMs, but then when I do, I'm going to go move into a neighborhood where no one looks like me. But I'm going to stay in my neighborhood. When I build a business, I'm going to build it in my neighborhood. But a wake-up call to all those business owners. Better customer service, better products. Run your business like you should run a business instead of running it like a side hustle. That is one thing we must improve upon that our ancestors had before. So I don't see it as a bad thing, but what do you guys think? I could be completely wrong. And always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey.